there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love. Hey, hey. Hey, 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 oh.
The Choose Love movement offers no-cost solutions that keep our kids safe, providing them with the skills and tools they need to flourish. Join us in our mission to create the world we want to live in, one that's connected and compassionate. Check us out at chooselovemovement.org. Together, we can choose love.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scarlett Lewis. Welcome to the Choose Love podcast, where we are literally talking to people who are helping to create the world that we want to live in, one that is safe and kind. So today we have a very special guest. I'm really excited for this conversation this morning. Her name is Lorraine Connell. She is the founder of Peers Not Fears. She has over 20 years of experience as an educator, taking my glasses off, leadership coach, and advocate for teen empowerment. Her passion for guiding teens stems from her belief that leadership is not something we're born with. It's a skill we can develop with practice, intention, and guidance. You can see why I like her. As someone who didn't always see herself as a leader, Lorraine understands the doubts many teens face. This is going to be a great conversation, Lorraine. We're talking about teens. Her advice comes from lived experience, years of working with young people, and a passion for unlocking potential. Lorraine's practical and empathetic approach makes her guidance relatable, actionable, and effective. By working with Lorraine or using her resources, you're not just learning about leadership, you're learning how to recognize it within yourself. This workbook is designed to give you the clarity. Well, she's selling a book and a workbook, clarity, skills, and encouragement you need to take your first steps towards becoming a confident, capable leader. And of course, we know that all educators are leaders. And of course, we want to raise good, effective, socially and emotionally competent leaders with high levels of character that are able and inspiring others to do the same. So nice to have you, Lorraine.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for hosting this space for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really, really excited for a project that Choose Love and your organization, Peers Not Fears, are going to be working with together in Rochester, New Hampshire. Rochester is becoming a Choose Love city community, and we're really excited about that. And Lorraine, you're going to be working in middle schools to facilitate peer-to-peer groups using the Choose Love curriculum. And I know from historical experience, having now run this organization for 12 years, and I think our program has been out for 8 or 9, that peer groups in middle school, especially, but also high school, are very effective. And it's so interesting to see how creative our educators have gotten in how they thoughtfully respond to the needs of their students using Choose Love. And, probably one of the most successful peer-to-peer groups I know of was run by John Cook in a school in Waterbury, Connecticut. And he broke his middle schoolers into like girls and boys. And though they developed such an incredible amount of trust, and the friendships that grew out of that were really incredible. And so I'm just really excited to talk to you about the peer-to-peer type model. And of course, at the very base of Choose Love, it is this choice that we make every day from the moment we wake up until the time we go to bed. And literally at its foundational very core, it is choosing love over fear, because we're either in our love part of our brain or our fear part of our brain. We can't be in both at the same time. And the outcomes of the choices that we make, whether we're in one or the other, are vastly different. Basically, we're not in control when we're in fear, and we are when we're in love. So the peers not fears, even that branding is really awesome, especially in today's world. I mean, needed now more than ever. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, and I mean, the name Peers Not Fears really generated because I, as a teacher, watched so many of my students come to school, be in school in that state of, what is my peer going to say to me? How am I going to act so that I am not being the one who is targeted? How do I avoid being seen? Right? So, like, I don't know that I would like name that as fear, but it really just generates this feeling of not being able to be who you are. And eventually it elevates itself to being fearful of coming to school because of my relationship with my peers. And so if I can redefine what peers are to each other, then they don't have to fear each other. We're all in a community together, which is why I think so much of the work that you're doing aligns so well with the work that I'm trying to create in schools, that, this is a match made in heaven, honestly.
Yeah, I think it is too. And, you talk about fear, and of course, anxiety is an extension of fear. And we know that anxiety levels are through the roof. And as you were talking about, a teen coming to school and thinking about, how to fit in so that you're not targeted, and how to be with the cool people, or I don't know, whatever. I thought all those things that you were talking about. I put myself in the shoes of the teens that you were talking about. And it's a really hard time.
It is.
Yeah, I know that a lot, our middle schools, it's been really interesting for me, especially over the past year, to talk about the struggles that they're facing. And so I think that, so talk about peers not fears. Talk about how this peer-based model can be effective, and why you think it's more important now than ever.
Yeah, so I will tell you that I was, a teacher, and we brought it was the accreditation process suggested that all high schools needed to have one adult that each student could rely on. And so we
Untrusted adult.
Yes, we created the advisory program at my school to facilitate that. And I remember being a teacher when advisory came through and feeling that anxiety, feeling that stress of like, oh gosh, now I need to be the adult for these specific children, as opposed to being the adult in my classroom for all of my students. It shifted for me. It was a different mentality. And so I struggled. I'm now in the world of all social and emotional learning is wonderful. Team building is wonderful. Connection is wonderful. But I was that teacher who was afraid of advisory, afraid of the curriculum that they were handing to me because I was afraid that I couldn't be an expert in it. And I was an expert in my classroom. I taught chemistry. I thought I was expert. And I do want to like just reflect really quickly back on something you said at the very beginning was that teachers, we know teachers are leaders. Teachers don't know that. We don't see ourselves as a leader. I mean, maybe some people do, but like from this work in leadership that I've done, I've realized that leadership is this really big thing that we're kind of afraid of, students all the way up to adults. I mean, I was mom, I was teacher, I was coach, I was advisor, but I wasn't leader for all the reasons that I talk about. But I want to get back to like sort of how I transitioned into the work. I just want to acknowledge that like it's not something we all know, and it's not something we all recognize. You know, as a mom, I didn't know I was the most important leader in my kid's life. And so if I wasn't calling myself a leader or seeing myself as a leader, how would my children know that they could also be leaders? If I didn't think I was a leader in my classroom, how would my students know that it was possible for them to be leaders? And so it's all sort of like in the same realm of the work that I'm doing now is to redefine what that means and how you can step into leadership. And I would say that that's what happened to me is like I felt like I couldn't lead in this advisory with social and emotional curriculum because I myself didn't have great social and emotional skills. I myself needed to work on the things that they wanted me to do with my students. And so all of a sudden, I shifted from feeling like an expert in chemistry to feeling like how could you put me in that position? And so I was one of those teachers that put the wall up, said no. I was, we don't want one more prep. I was that teacher that thought it was a good idea, but the way that I had to do it just didn't make sense to me. And so no, I was like the hands up, stay out of I did it because I'm a
So
people
hence the
pleaser.
fear, hence the
It
fear.
was so
Right?
fear. It was fear based. It was entirely fear based.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you can admit that because I admit it all the time that when I came upon these essential life skills 12 years ago at 44 years old, I didn't have them. That's
Oh,
why I was so amazed. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if, my son's murderer had had them, maybe more of the educators, maybe more of the people around him in his life to be able to guide him and model for him, the tragedy would never have happened. And I wouldn't be the person to do it because I didn't have them. And so even let's say even if you are coming at this from a place of mastery, let's say.
mm,
And I will say, like, I focus on this 7 days a week, 24 hours
right.
a day for 12 years. And as soon as I think, yeah, I'm pretty good. I've got, this scenario going right here pretty well. A curveball comes and I'm triggered and I react and, in anger. And so we're all, I think maybe we've branded SEL in the wrong way as it's some sort of destination because it's not, it's the journey.
It
And
is.
the journey is so fascinating if you can be fascinated rather than frustrated, because you're going to get hit with curveballs and different situations and difficulties, roadblocks, challenges, and it's going to happen. And actually, this is what we teach in middle and high school. And it's your thoughtful response to those that determines how you move through it. But that's for the rest of your life. Like there's no getting there because
No.
you have to take your skills and tools out in different situations. So I wish maybe that more educators knew it's not a matter of being a master of this. It's a matter of having the courage to say, I'm going to learn, grow, and be strengthened practice and reinforce right alongside the kids, because that's what I'm doing every day. When I do Choose Love and I go around and I speak, I'm learning and practicing and growing every single day. If I've learned something new when I put my head down on the pillow at night, I'm a happy person. So as long as we're learning and growing, we're living. And that includes our social and emotional competence. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I just thought I would.
No, I mean, it's so true. And that's, I mean, it comes back to that being the challenge in middle and high school is that we're putting teachers in this place that is new to them. And this is the work that Choose Love and Peers Not Peers really like it harnesses is that it's uncomfortable and we're not learning unless we are feeling that discomfort. But one of the challenges that I talk about in the zones of comfort is that it can get to the point where you are in fear and you are in, that survival mode and you shut down. And so how do we help teachers? How do we help students? How do we help the world know what it's like to be okay in that challenge zone? And so that's where I think the partnership is going to come in. And what happened for me was that there was this program at the school that was called peer leadership, and they had started putting peer leaders in the freshmen. So the peer leaders were upperclassmen and they started working in the freshman class advisory. I happened to have a freshman class advisory that year. And all of a sudden, advisory felt fun. Advisory felt like something I wanted to do. And it was something that I wanted to be part of. And it was just because we shifted the focus from me to the kids in the classroom. And I think it was a mental thing for me that I had to shift. This is not about me. This is about the work that we're all doing together. And it was just by having a peer leader in that room with me that took the weight off of my shoulders. And so that's when it started to like occur to me that there's another way to do this. And my journey is a longer story, but I left teaching in June of 23 to really implement this peer-to-peer work in every age because we don't know that we're leaders and we believe these myths that leaders are perfect. We believe that leaders are born with these skills and we believe that leaders have a title. And I was perpetuating all of those myths in the work that I was doing when I was working in school. And now I work, like you said, I work really hard to counter those myths. I still fall into them. When I am in a school, I'm like, oh, we should work with these kids. Well, that's me picking them again and not letting them come to us. And so it's a work in progress, but like Choose Love and social and emotional work it is a progress or it's a process. It's the journey. And that's what's so amazing.
And our world's changing. Our kids are changing. We're changing. Hopefully we come to the table every day, attempting to be the best version of ourselves, but also having learned and grown from the day before. And so, it's a constantly changing environment, and there are new challenges that are thrown at us. And so what does that look like? How does the peer-to-peer model look in a classroom?
Well, it's not necessarily going to happen in the classroom, and I'd really like to go back and highlight the work that is starting with Rochester in March of 25. It literally is about to happen in 2 weeks. So as we're talking,
Amazing.
So yeah, so I'm going to go in on one day and I'm going to have a conversation with the entire seventh grade class, which is about 250 students. And I'm going to talk to them about what leadership is and how they might define leadership differently and how they are all feeling similar feelings, but they feel so alone, right? So I'm going to ask them to stand up if they've ever felt like oh, I wish I had my notes with me, but they're going to stand up for a certain series of questions. And then I'm going to ask them to stand or sit down if they've ever felt a certain series of questions. And the ones to stand up are in the direction of leadership, right? So have you ever made a decision, or have you ever made a choice that affected another person, right? So that's them standing up. And then have you ever felt that you weren't smart enough? Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough, right? Then they all sit back down. And then I recognize that, you know, we're all feeling the same things. We're just not feeling them at the same time. And then I'm going to ask them to put their hands in their lap. And, you know, like if you've ever done this, you know, you put your hands and you fold them and then you switch the orientation of your fingers,
Yeah.
and it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's not intolerable. It's like, well, I'm going to put it back. But if you sit with that discomfort, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to achieve the panic of pushing you so far out. So I'm going to have this conversation with them, and then I'm going to pull them into smaller groups throughout their day, study hall or some sort of class. And we're going to do these leadership activities where they are going to experience this moment where they're trying something new, they're laughing, they're experiencing something. And then I'm going to tell them the skills that they've learned by doing these games. And that's what leadership is. And then from there, I'm going to encourage them at the talk and at these smaller group activities for them to sign up to work with me on developing leadership. And they are also going to try and target the kids who are in what's called tier 2 and tier 3. Those are the kids that struggle in typical academic structures and they act up. And I talk about those kids in my book about how those behaviors, those actions are really a way of communicating because they don't know how to communicate with us in a way that says, I need you to see me. I need you to help me. I need you to support me. And so we're going to actually target those kids to be the eventual distributors and facilitators of Choose Love in the classroom. And we're at the end of spring, and we know that we're going to have the 7th graders for a short period of time, but the intention is that these 7th graders, as they evolve into 8th graders, will come back and start the process again with the next year 7th graders. And they're going to do these small group activities that I'm facilitating this year. They're going to facilitate them as best as they can. We all grow in leadership in very different ways. And so we're going to have lots of support for them in that space. And eventually, these individual students who are growing in leadership are going to experience the Choose Love curriculum as we're working through these leadership activities so that they can understand that they're also developing social and emotional learning skills that are life skills, that are problem solving skills, that are decision making skills, that when we don't have practice and challenges where we face them together, we don't build those skills. Just like leadership, like you're not born with leadership skills, just like you're not born with social and emotional skills. It's like a muscle, you practice. And so that's the vision, is that as I'm working my way through Rochester's middle school, these kids are becoming more and more empowered to facilitate, to roll this out. And it doesn't fall on the teacher's plate. They're just along for the ride. And they have this more like embraced feeling because they've been included on the ride and they've not been the one that had to deliver the curriculum.
Hi, my name is Scarlett Lewis. I'm the founder of the Choose Love movement. I founded this organization following the murder of my 6-year-old son, Jesse, and 27 others at Sandy Hook Elementary School. I realized then that we must come together in order to solve the escalating issues of violence, substance abuse, and mental illness in our country and world. I created the Choose Love movement because, as humans, we are 99.9% genetically the same. We all need love, and we all also feel pain. We teach all ages how to choose love and grow through pain. It's pretty simple. Love feels good, and anger, hatred, and resentment feel bad. Hurt people hurt people. Even though we can't always choose what happens to us, we can always choose how we respond. Love is always the strongest response. 6-year-old Jesse stood up to the shooter and saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. We all have the capacity for that courage. Join the Choose Love movement today and be part of the solution by creating a safer, more peaceful, and loving world.
So, so you give them some leadership training, and then the goal is that these 7th graders and then 8th graders deliver the Choose Love curriculum training to the younger kids.
That's the intention of, like, it might take longer, but that's the plan. And through that, what they're doing as they're going back into the next year, 7th graders, is they're building leadership capacity within those 7th graders, who will then, by the end of their 7th grade year, have developed some of their own leadership skills. Maybe they're in the program with me and practicing some more leadership skills. And then by the time they're 8th graders, they're doing the same thing, and they're going back and developing this and building it in the new 7th grade year. So it becomes sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think that leadership has a lot to do with self-esteem
Yes.
and self-confidence, self-worth. All those things are related, but slightly different. And I know in the peer-to-peer programs that I know about in our other schools, simply the act of learning about the lesson, the say a courage lesson, and providing that to a group of younger kids instills that self-confidence. And not only do you understand the lesson better yourself in having to teach it, but you walk away feeling more self-worth, self-confidence, all that stuff yourself.
Yeah.
So that in itself is teaching leadership. And so I think finding and intertwining the social and emotional component alongside the leadership component is really important, because you can't have one without the other.
You really can't. And I would say that already most of the work that I'm doing is aligned with the Choose Love curriculum. It's just, I just have to make sure that I'm showing and clearly articulating the connection, right? So when I'm doing my zones of comfort with students, it is directly aligned with your the courage experience that you talk about, and there are clear overlaps that I'm going to pull both experiences and create this opportunity that is directly aligned, so that these students, and that's the other thing, is the way that I work is that if a kid is in a group with me and they choose not to participate in the activity that I'm running, I'm not going to force them in, because it's about building trust. It's about building understanding. And I think that as an adult, that has been really hard for me, because I'm like, but that doesn't look the way I think it should look. And so really fighting that story that's in my head that everybody has to participate. They don't. This child who has decided to opt out of the activity is watching his peers or her peers engage in a way that he's not ready to engage. And by observing it, he's coming into these skills at a way that is attainable for him, or is like it's the drink that he's ready to have at that moment when maybe the rest of them are like, give me that full glass of water, I can't wait, dumping it on their heads, and he's like, oh my God, what is happening here? And if I force them in to participating, they go into that zone of panic, and it counteracts everything we're trying to teach.
Yeah, it is almost an art of, I don't know, in the last week, I've been saying multiple times, everything that you want is on the other side of your comfort level. It's outside your comfort zone. And so, but it's an art, right? As you
It
said,
really
you,
is.
you have to get out of your comfort zone to learn and grow. But if you push too hard, you go into fear,
Yeah,
and
fear.
and you don't learn in the fear. So you have to, it's almost an art, and you have to know, you have to have self-awareness in your body of what you're feeling, where you are on that comfort zone scale, and have some coping mechanisms, which we have in the Choose Love movement, the breathing and the tapping,
Right.
havening, in order to keep yourself, active and learning and a little bit uncomfortable. And even learning, I think I've been just a little bit uncomfortable and pushed to the extreme in the last 12 years, more than any other time in my life. And I think I've learned or adapted so much that I view being uncomfortable as energizing. And so I have almost grown to like that feeling.
Well, and I think if
I
we
might
don't,
as well, I'm living in it.
yeah, yeah. Well, and if we don't come out on the other side of seeing that the positive nature of that growth, then we're going to resist stepping out of that zone of comfort as often as we can, because we're so afraid of being pushed too far. And that actually, I want to ask your listeners to visualize three circles on top of each other. So the comfort zone, we all have this vision of a comfort zone being a circle, and the panic zone or the fear zone is that third circle out. And so often, our teens, our kids are in that outer zone. How do we pull them back in? And this is my favorite thing about the work that I do is if you are in your zone of comfort, that center circle, and you know that you're feeling pretty good, like but you're not learning, and you look around the room, and I say this in math because there's clear panic in math class for a lot of kids. If you look around the room and you see that student who is in panic mode, you can reach your hand out and put your hand out to that child or to that friend or that peer who's in panic. And what you do is you pull them out of that fear place and you pull them into the challenge zone, and you're pulling yourself out of your comfort zone and into your challenge zone. And I just had an interview shared with Jeff Freegon, who works with the Brown Center, and they are experiential educators, adventure educators. And he talked about the challenge with bullying is if you know the person that is bullying you and you're in a community with them, you're more resilient to their behavior if you understand who they are. And the bully is less likely to do the things that they do to harm you if they know who you are. So it's about building community, and that hand out to the panic zone and the hand in to the person in the comfort zone, pulling each other into your challenge zone. That's about building community. And so that's, that example of that kid who was sitting out of the activity, if one of his peers who's like having a great time turns around and looks and sees this child sitting out and says, hey, do you want to come over with me? That's that piece of growing together that you can't you can't package that easily. And it's about building that resilience. It's about building that community. It's about building that comfort to
Courage. It's about building
courage. It
courage.
absolutely is. It's all about that courage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know about our listeners, but while you're talking, I'm thinking about me,
Mhm.
and how all these things apply to just as much to adults as they do
Yes.
to our kids. So, so I hope that the educators get involved, and, because it's a really fun process, and it definitely benefits them as much,
Mhm.
if not more, than the
Yeah.
students, because they're just learning. We might be being reminded and reinforced, and then practicing. But I always, I rarely say, but when I'm talking to middle schoolers, I'm thinking, everything that we are teaching them, and everything that they're struggling with, we're struggling with too.
Yes.
It's a human thing at that age, and it's the same skills and tools that we need, that they need.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think back to that teacher that I was afraid of advisory, afraid of social and emotional learning. I put my hands up and pretended that I didn't want to do it rather than reaching out and asking for help, right? And so I was in my fear zone, and if I had, it eventually came to pass that when the peer leaders came in, they provided that they were comfortable because they were having fun, and I was the kid sitting on the bleachers, right? And so it's like it came full circle. And I just needed to ask for help. And instead of asking for help initially, I pretended that I didn't want to do it, which was saying that I didn't need the help and I didn't need the skills, which then translated information to my students that they didn't need it and they shouldn't want it. And so it's like, all of this, and that's why I wrote my book, A Teacher Story, is because so many of these experiences taught me what I was modeling to my students is not what I wanted for them. My insecurities, my challenges, I was afraid of. I was afraid that I didn't want my students to see me making a mistake, right? So that told them, I mean, I was in chemistry. We make mistakes all the time. That's what that's why it's so hard. But I wouldn't let them see me making a mistake, so they didn't think they could make mistakes. And so it was like all of this coming to understand and reflect what the messages were that I was sending and how many students rose above my expectations of them in ways that are so exciting. I think I have like 13 or 14 stories of students who really can mirror any student in any school. They were my students, but the troublemaker, the quiet student, the student who has intellectual difficulties. There are stories of all of those kids stepping into leadership.
That's incredible. So it's available for all. And while you were talking about, I love you having the courage to share that you were the teacher that sat on the sidelines and said, pretty much like, this isn't my job, and feeling like,
Yeah.
I am not trained in this, and so I'm not going to do it. But you can also see how that could turn into defensive anger. Like
Was.
I actually, and I've seen that as well. It's always kind of curious why, bridging the social and emotional component into classrooms produces anger. But of course, anger and resentment is a mask for fear.
Yeah.
And so, being able to look at yourself, which you did, and reflect and understand why, and then turn around and embrace it, is pretty amazing. And so, that story in your book is, very, very powerful. And just you sharing that here is very powerful, because I know that there are a lot of people feeling the exact same way that are listening to
Yeah.
this.
I'm not special. And it
Well,
really
it's the
takes,
reason, it's actually the reason that SEL is not in every classroom. Character, social, emotional
a
development isn't
hundred
in every
percent.
classroom because, and there's even, this resistance to it because there's lack of understanding of what it is. And frankly, 12 years ago and a day ago, before my own personal tragedy, and then me dedicating my life to being part of the solution, I might have been one of the resistors, and I'd never heard of it before. And I don't want my kid indoctrinated and, all
Right,
of this.
right.
And
It's
so
about knowing.
I get the fear, but that is fear. And, if you really care, then you take the time to listen. And by the way, that takes a lot of courage. It really does. Like, as you said, when you're triggered and you're in your fear-based, your freeze, fight, or flight, you're not in your prefrontal cortex, the highest and best version of yourself. And
No,
you're not even in control. So, and you may not even have coping mechanisms to get back into that zone where you can learn. But that's what this is all about.
it
Is
is.
you
It
know
is. Well, and
exactly.
it makes it so much easier to understand the behaviors of our students, right? Like as you were talking about that fear, that anger, that resentment, that like, and me telling you, like I was the one who put my hands up. Those are our students, right? Like they're coming into my classroom. Chemistry is hard. I'm putting them in their challenge zone and
Yeah.
hoping I'm not pushing them too far out of that challenge zone. It's exhausting. And if I'm spending my entire day in that fear-based zone, like I'm done by the end of the day. And why do our kids struggle at the end of the day? It's because they've spent their entire day fighting the vulnerability. And you say courage, and the total connection is being vulnerable. And what kid wants to be vulnerable in middle or high school with the way that we feel our peers are judging us, right? So like we have to build that connection that we are in community together. These are our peers. They are not our enemies. And it's going to take a long time, and that's what you're doing. You're pulling one sand off every time till we get to that rock that maybe someday could be smooth, but
I'm
then
sorry, are you talking about our kids? Or are you talking about our nation right now?
about
I got
everything.
I got this flash. I'm like, wait a minute, what is she talking about? Because that's exactly what us adults need as well.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, that's the beauty of what the work that we're doing, right? Is we're empowering our kids to learn these skills so that when they become adults, when they become parents, when they become the leaders, they're not afraid. They're willing to be vulnerable. I mean, as a teacher, I didn't want my kids in my classroom to see me make a mistake. That was a lot of work.
I think it's so powerful that you're willing to admit that. It's beautiful, and it's helping others see themselves in you. And I try to do that for parents.
You
I
do. I
I, I
know.
never heard of what we're talking about. I didn't even know it existed, or that there was an effort in schools. And um and when I started, less than 10% of schools had an essential life skills program. And I think it's definitely more now, but not enough, because it should be in every school. We wouldn't be in the position that we're in, safety wise,
Right.
and the cliff that our kids have fallen off, mentally and emotionally, if we had these essential life skills programs in schools. That's why I've dedicated my life to this. I believe it with all my heart and soul. And I appreciate you pulling in this kind of different aspect, and not saying that it's all on the teachers. Like, yes, we know
Not.
you have this really, almost really hard job of teaching, the curriculum to kids who are struggling. But and here's this other thing that you're not, 100% proficient in. And I can say that because I'm not either. And I focus on it all the time. Journey, not destination. And so adding, anxiety to their already, I call our educators our modern day superheroes. I mean, we give them the most precious asset for the majority of the day and ask them to help shape and mold them into the human beings that they're going to become. Of course, we would give them all of the skills and tools, and we would want them to also experience, to reinforce and practice and maybe even learn their own character, social, emotional development. It just seems so obvious, but for you to bring it in a peer-led fashion, I think is brilliant, because it reinforces the learning, creates the leadership that our communities and certainly our country needs for to provide us hope for a better future. And of course, our own personal responsibility to leave this world better than we found it for our children. Each and every one of us has that responsibility. So how do we do that? I don't actually know any other way to do it than what you and I are doing.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that, you're the point of contact, right? Like you can't do it all, right? Like if you're trying to spread this message, it can't just be you. And so you've empowered other people to help you bring this message forward. The same thing is true in schools. Like we can't ask a teacher to do it all. They're not enough. And so we have this resource. It's full. These schools are full of kids. Why are we not empowering them to bring this message forward? We give them the tools. They're going to go home and tell their parents. We give them the tools. They share it with their friends who don't go to school. And it creates this ripple that if I'm just one person, how do I make it happen for the masses? And you're doing it by empowering other people to bring forth the message. I'm doing it by saying, let's take the teacher from the top and bring them down in, let the kids flounder through, and let us all make mistakes together. That's how we're going to change.
I mean, that's how we get through life.
Yeah. Yes.
For the
Yes.
rest,
It's like you said,
of their
essential
lives.
life skills, right?
Exactly. Right. We're just kind of all walking each other home, as Rumi says, and doing the best that we can with the skills and tools that we have. So all of you listening, you can have better skills and tools, and it takes work. If you want to do better and be better, feel better, it takes work, and it's
courage.
possible. And the courage to start on the journey and take personal responsibility for where you are and where you're going. And that's what Choose Love is all about. And we know that we can't, the frustrating thing is, you can't go in and do it for kids. Because if you could, we'd just be shaping these little kids out of clay. They'd all be perfect. And and you can't do that. They have to do it. They have to make the choices. And that's how we were created, to be able to make choices. And that's where our personal power comes from. So we are giving them the opportunity to start this at a younger age, and they're capable. They're really capable. I mean, I was just in Texas, and I had these middle schoolers asking me questions about the program. There were some brilliant questions that I haven't been asked by PhDs,
Right.
like just really, they blew me away. I was like, whoa, that's like the most brilliant question I've been asked since I started, and nobody's ever asked me that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me think about it for a minute. It was really great. So it's wonderful, the opportunity to empower this age group that we know is struggling right now, and no one has figured out how to help them. I mean, let's face it. It's, a lot of people are trying, but nobody's figured it out. And so I think that this is the best idea. I've seen it work in Choose Love schools. It's very powerful, especially for this age group. So I'm really, really excited about this project that we're doing in Rochester, New Hampshire, which has an talk about leadership, incredible leadership in Rochester, New Hampshire. They want to pave the way and be the model for other communities. And they have an incredible mayor and incredible leadership in their schools. And I mean, obviously to have brought you in and enabled you to do this, it's really, really incredible. So huge shout out to them and to you, Lorraine, for all that you're doing. And I look forward to working with you on this project and then many, many more in the future.
Yes, let's pilot this for schools in the future, because like the solution, we need to find a way to get to help, and so that's why we're doing this work. We're not doing it to make money. We're not doing it to, we just want to make things better, like you said, leaving it better for our children.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Lorraine Connell. She is the founder of Peers Not Fears. And we're going to have links in her bio to her books and workbook and contact information. So thanks very much for listening to the Choose Love podcast, and we will see you next time. In the meantime, remember, thoughtfully responding with love is the way to become the highest and best version of yourself, and you get to model that for others as well. And in doing so, we create the world that we want to live in, one that is safe and kind.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let